You're watching Pedestal by Ashley Sargeant Hagan. Chapter 8. They had tea in the orangery, the white-pillared colonnade that was once Queen Anne's favorite place to entertain. They were greeted by a thin young man with a carefully trimmed beard and chestnut shoulder-length curls. "Oh," he exclaimed as they approached, "it is an honor to seat you, sir. To think, a young Polish man like myself, to have the honor of seating Edwin Sterling. I watch your show all the time. And oh," he gasped, seeing Adriana, "is this the mystery woman?" Edwin bit his lip and raised his eyebrows. "Not what I need right now." The Polish maitre d' took the look as a confirmation. He nodded his head back at Edwin confidentially. He seated them near the window with great enthusiasm. "Is this okay?" he asked Edwin. "By the window? We wouldn't want any scenes. I hope no one bothers you. I will personally slap them if they try." Edwin assured him there would probably be no need for slapping any customers. Adriana giggled as the Polish maitre d' sauntered back to his post by the door. "He's very enthusiastic about his job," she commented. She seemed amused by his attentions. Edwin agreed, trying to keep himself from noticing the way her nose wrinkled as she talked or thinking about kissing her lovely lips again. Friendship. It's all she'll give. Why? He forced the dark, foreboding thoughts to the back of his mind. Don't think about the possible reasons. Don't think about what or who. "Just 50 yards away," a large American woman was telling her husband at the next table. "Can you believe it, Harold?" Apparently, Harold couldn't, as evidenced by his grunt as he stuffed a cake into his mouth. Edwin and Adriana exchanged glances. The woman's voice was loud enough for most of the tables near them to hear her. "Really, it gives me the shivers," continued the woman, "to think we could have been blown up." "Nothing blew up, Mildred," Harold reminded her. "They dismantled the bomb before it went off." He stuffed another cake into his mouth. "Well, it could have blown us up, and on our anniversary trip, too." Curiosity overtook the Polish maitre d'. He swept over to the American's table. "Excuse me," he interrupted. "Are you talking about the situation earlier? We heard it was a bomb threat. We just couldn't believe it. We're all on edge." Adriana smiled. "He seems more excited than anxious," she whispered across the table. "Yes, it has us on edge as well," Mildred declared. "We were passing an apartment building just outside the gates of the palace, and all of a sudden, we were swarmed by all of these men in black, police, and I don't know what else." "At an apartment building?" asked the Polish young man. "Oh, you mean a block of flats." "Apartment, they said," Mildred replied, "although they tell me that's how the wealthy people do hotels here. Fancy apartments." "Yes, it's true," commented the young man knowingly. "Fancy, fancy." "There was a bomb threat," explained her husband, "but they got it, before it went off, I mean. When we got there, they were just finishing up. Had everything blocked off still, though." Edwin looked at Adriana. "I guess that's what all the people were doing earlier," he said. "We must have just missed it," she agreed. Odd. Terrorist activity again? "The police were all over the place," said Mildred. "Wouldn't let us get by for the longest time. We thought we wouldn't be able to come to the palace at all." The young man shook his head sympathetically. "And then we get here, and there's no guards or anything. It's strange. Aren't the British concerned about security here at Kensington? I mean, everywhere else we've been, it's been those bear hat boys." "Oh," exclaimed the maitre d', lowering his voice and looking secretive. "There are guards. You just won't see them." "Really?" said Harold, intrigued. "Oh, yes," the maitre d' continued, "plain clothes. Walking around the garden among us. You'd never know they were there, unless you committed a crime, of course." He laughed at his own joke. The Americans laughed with him. "Well, I'm glad to hear it. It makes me feel a little bit safer," said Mildred. "But it really was so awful," she complained, fanning herself. "I mean, we could have been killed, blown to bits." Harold shrugged his shoulders again and reached for another cake. "It didn't go off, Mildred," he said with his mouth full. After their meal, Adriana went to visit the ladies' room. Edwin waited outside on the terrace in the clear sunshine. It was a beautiful day, uncharacteristically warm for London in June. He fiddled with his collar and wished he hadn't worn a long-sleeved shirt. He could see squirrels skittering around under the nearby tall holly trees, shaped into hedges that lined the walkway. As he watched one of them scurry under a bush, he noticed a young woman standing behind one of the thickly leaved hedges. Paparazzi? No, too timid. The young woman met his gaze and gathered the courage to come out from her hiding place and approach him. Fan. She's a fan, glazed look in her eye. Pedestal time. The woman grabbed Edwin's hand and wouldn't let go. Oh my gosh, it's really you, she said, blinking. Good afternoon, Edwin said politely, glancing quickly around to locate the maitre d' standing in the open doorway behind him. If I need him. I saw you go in the gates off the street, said the woman, still holding his hand. I couldn't go into the palace because, of course, it's a lot of money. So I saw you go in at the gates, so I thought I'll just wait for him until he comes out because the garden's free, you know, and I can stand in the garden and wait for you, so I did. Well, that's nice, said Edwin. He tried to pull his hand away, but she held it tightly. He noticed that despite the somewhat erratic look in her eye, the woman was not unattractive. How does this happen, he wondered. This obsession. Doesn't she know any nice young men? Saw you walking with that girl. Her lip curled slightly at the word. Tea at the orangery, that's nice, she continued. I've had tea there once. On my birthday, it's nice. She nodded her head up and down, gazing into his eyes, still smiling, and looking at him adoringly. How can this end? Suddenly, Adriana was at his elbow. Edwin felt relieved. She smiled respectfully at the young woman, although he could tell she knew this was not one of his friends. He watched in surprise as the expression on the young fan's face changed rapidly to one of malicious anger. You're the mystery woman, she hissed, letting go of his hand. Finally, he shook it to help the circulation get started again. I saw your picture online, she growled, stepping closer to Adriana. You're even uglier in person. Adriana stared at the young woman with a puzzled expression. Help, thought Edwin. I'm going to need some assistance here. You can't have him, you know, the young woman continued, her hand slipping into her pocket. Edwin is destined to love me, not you. I don't even know you, Edwin reminded her, shaking his head. But you will love me once you know me, she said, her attention momentarily on him again. You're the only one for me, Edwin, and I won't let some mystery woman take away my chance. Edwin made silent signs to the Polish maitre d' that help was needed. When he turned back again, he was shocked to see Adriana gripping the fan's arm in midair, a small switchblade knife glinting in the afternoon sun. No, oh God, no! Before he could move, it was over. While gripping the young woman's arm, Adriana had stepped toward her, putting her foot behind the woman's legs. She tripped her, and while holding onto her back and still gripping her knife-wielding arm, she gently lowered the woman to the ground. With a flick of her wrist, she then disarmed the woman of the knife, kicked it away, and put her foot against the side of the woman's neck to keep her from getting up. The young fan began wailing like a child. Help! She's trying to kill me! Edwin! Edwin! She screamed from the ground. Oh my gosh, security! Shrieked the Polish maitre d', rushing toward them. Then just as quickly he rushed back into the restaurant, shouting directions to his startled staff. Seemingly out of nowhere, a man wearing a jogging suit appeared, flashing a badge. He took over, allowing Adriana to step back. Edwin stared at her as she looked his way. She seemed embarrassed. What just happened? How did she know how to do that? A few of the other tourists noticed the scuffle and stood gaping nearby. It had happened so quickly there wasn't time for real panic. The aggressive fan shouted insults as she was being dragged away by the undercover guard, who had been joined by two other men from other parts of the garden. One was wearing a business suit and another was in a hoodie. Harold, I wonder if that's the bomber, asked Mildred in a loud whisper from the terrace. Harold shrugged, fascinated by the scene in front of him. I guess the maitre d' was right, said Adriana, giggling nervously as her eyes followed the retreating group. Plainclothes guards. She's in shock, I think. I am too, I think. Edwin took her in his arms and held her close to him. She allowed it. He could feel her shivering. My fault, all because of me. Adriana, I'm so sorry, he said. It's my fault. This wouldn't have happened if anything had happened to you, I would never forgive myself. He held her tightly, pressing his lips against her hair. He noticed that he was shivering as well. They had to wait for the constable to come. He asked a lot of questions, particularly of Adriana. Did they know the perpetrator? What had she said? Why did she want to kill Adriana? It all sounded so preposterous, so like a movie or an episode of Dr. Hanover. The Polish maitre d' was only too delighted to give evidence. Edwin hoped his story wouldn't be embellished, but really, it's so absurd already. What difference would embellishment make? They took a cab back to Bethany's home. Adriana gazed out the window as they drove. Edwin looked over at her. She seemed tense. I would be too if someone had just tried to kill me. Where did you learn to do that? He asked, breaking the silence. To flip an armed woman onto her back and take her knife. Adriana turned toward him. Well, she wasn't exactly Chuck Norris, she joked. But really, where did you learn that? He insisted. She shrugged. I used to watch my brother's karate class. I guess I picked up a few things. Edwin grunted. Adriana smiled. The constable didn't believe me either. But it's true, she said with a shrug. He asked me who I was working for. Like some agency or something? I guess. He wasn't happy when I told him I was a mere historian. Edwin could hear the constable's sardonic voice in his head. Mr. Sterling, what do you know about this Adriana Allen? He had asked Edwin privately. She says she learned to do that by watching her brother's karate classes, but any normal woman would have stepped away from the crazy fan and not toward her. That seems like training to me. Any normal woman would have been killed.